important topic that rarely gets highlighted called PMDD. But before we do, I want to introduce you to our very first guest, Jacqueline.
Hey Jasmine, how are
Hi,
you?
thank you for being on our
Thank
platform.
you for having me, girl.
Of
Thank
course,
you.
of course. So Jacqueline, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what PMDD is?
Yes. So we will start with what PMDD is. I know a lot of people haven't heard of it. I'm just coming into knowledge of it, right? But PMDD is Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder. Essentially, it is the brain's response to the normal fluctuations and shifts during our menstrual cycle. Right, so we know after ovulation, our estrogen drops, and then as we're going into that luteal phase, our progesterone rises. So with that, there's a heightened sensitivity to our neurotransmitters like serotonin. And we're having, those of us that have PMDD have a hard time to that normal fluctuation of those, rise and fall of our hormones. So that's why somebody can go to the doctor and say, hey, I want to get my hormones tested, and your hormones are fine, right? Because it's not necessarily your hormones alone, it is your brain's response to that normal fluctuation in your hormones.
And you mentioned that it can happen maybe 2 weeks before your next cycle.
Yes.
So if you go to the doctor and you get tested for it outside of that window, it's possible that your labs might not even reflect it, it sounds like.
Right.
Okay,
So
that makes
typically
sense.
1 or 2 weeks before is when you have those symptoms, which lead to irritability, severe, it could be severe depression, it could be anger, it could be tension, it could be difficulty concentrating.
So these are some of the signs that can be
Yes.
red flags for
Yes.
PMDD.
Yes.
I'm gonna be honest, I'm not that familiar with PMDD, which is why I really wanted to have you on the platform, so I can receive the education as well. Can you tell me what is the difference between PMDD and PMD, or like endometriosis, or just some of the other possibilities that it could be, the differential diagnoses we would say?
Right. So most people, most girls, most people who menstruate, we've heard of like PMS, right? We grew up, PMS, which is premenstrual syndrome, right? But with PMDD, it's like you have those symptoms of irritability and mood swings in PMS, but with PMDD, it's more so on the edge of a great tension or anger or feeling on the edge, or just that feeling of hopelessness. So it is on the DSM-5, right? That's how they categorize it. So you have to have, I want to say about 2 to 5 of the symptoms, because there's not a diagnostic test. It's more of a, do you have these symptoms
that correlate with this diagnosis? And just for those who may not be familiar, the DSM-5 is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual.
Yes, to classify mental health disorders. So PMDD is on there, which again, all of this is new to me, right? So
that's actually what I kind of wanted to get into. I want to know more about you, because I looked at your platform and you seem very educated on the topic. And I don't want to make the assumption, of course, but is PMDD something that you're experiencing?
Yes. So I was just diagnosed about a year ago. But just looking in hindsight, I can say I've probably been dealing with this for much longer, right? But just again, not knowing that PMDD was an actual option, and just thought like, oh, well, it's just my period.
We kind of just brush it off.
Exactly, we brush it off, and then being as though at that time when I was diagnosed, I was 38. So I'm thinking, okay, girl, you're coming up on perimenopause, maybe it's perimenopause, But when I went to the doctor, they're like, yeah, let's do a panel, and all my hormones, everything, came back normal, because again, it's not necessarily your hormones.
Right.
But I thought I was walking in with thinking like, okay, you're coming up on perimenopause just because of your age, you're right there on that cusp. But once I came back in for my results, sat down, they're like, I kind of explain, like this is what I've been experiencing, and she was just like, okay, give me a second, and she stepped out, right? Stepped out. I'm sitting in the, room just waiting. You're in your little gown, butt naked, it's cold. So I'm just sitting there waiting, like, oh God. She comes back in and she's just like, well, I spoke to the other doctor, and she's like, it sounds like, you're experiencing PMDD, and I'm just like, whoa.
What is that?
What is it? Right. And again, I'm 38, and I'm just like, I've never heard of this. You know what I mean? So what do you mean it's PMDD? And that's where I really started with, what is that? Okay, well, how do I get rid of it? You know what I mean? What does this mean for me?
What does this look like?
What does this look like? So I had all these questions. In that moment, I was also angry. You know what I mean? But I was also relieved as well. Yeah.
So since you found out about your diagnosis, you said that was about a year ago, right? Do you feel like you have the support that you need now to manage? Do you feel like you're in a good place with your diagnosis, or is it still a bit of a struggle on a day to day?
So, great question. I think that I am still strategizing what kind of like the way forward and the way ahead looks like for me. So I have, implemented certain things and certain strategies now to help alleviate some of the symptoms that I was experiencing and still experience. But like 100% no, you know what I mean? But I think that I'm slowly but surely getting there. So one of those, I know, like, some things I just can't do anymore, or I really have to plan, right? To just strategize and like, girl, you're probably not going to be feeling your best at this time, so let's push this to a later date. Or, really understanding, it made me really get into understanding my cycle, understanding all of the phases of our cycles, not just when, we're bleeding, right? Which again, I don't think a lot of us, we didn't get that education, right? Nobody taught us this stuff, about our cycle. So just really understanding the cycle, what my body's going through, and then implementing certain things into my life that I wasn't necessarily doing before, has helped tremendously for me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. There's a couple of things that you actually said that stood out for me, and one of those things was that you might have some plans coming up, and then when you're having your experiences or you're experiencing those symptoms, you might have to push things back. So with this diagnosis, I'm assuming that it can impact not just you, but the relationships in your life with your family and your friends. So do you want to?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So definitely. So, and that's kind of like to take a step back. That's really how I found out, like, okay, something's wrong, something's off, right? Because it was moments where I had to tell my son, like, okay, mom needs a few minutes, you know what I mean? And I would just go in my room and just close off and be in my room. And those few minutes turned into like all day, right? So I'm just like, that was one of my like red flags, like, okay, girl, something's not right.
Quite right.
Two was just having intrusive thoughts. So I've always been a person, one, to have dark humor. So that wasn't like a red flag, per se,
Right.
because I've always had air on the dark humor side.
Okay.
But it wasn't until like those moments where it's like, okay, God, if I don't wake up, I'll be okay. You know what I mean? Like, I won't have to deal with this, right? So that was two red flags. It's like, girl, you've never, like, always had dark humor, but it was never to.
Never in regard to yourself and to your life.
Right, to that extent, right? Like, girl, you have a whole son, you got a whole, like, you got stuff to do. You can't,
You can't not wake up.
Exactly, you cannot wake up, but in those moments, that's how I felt, And then three, I think one of the most alarming as well was, I remember when I had literally sat at my computer all night prepping a slide deck for work. Girl, when I say around the clock because I had a training like the next morning that I was supposed to give at work, and had nothing on the slides, and sat at my computer all night long like, why can't I get anything on these slides? Because I was just having such a hard time concentrating.
Yes.
You know, where I just had to call out of work and be like, you know what, I can't come in today. I don't. And again, at that time, I didn't know what was going on, but I'm just like, I can't do this, you know. And it was like kind of one of those moments where it's like it was nighttime and then you blink and it was morning. Right?
You do.
Exactly. So I'm just like, okay, well, girl, you can't go to work. You ain't got nothing to present, you know. So those were like the most alarming to me. That.
And that was out of character for you.
Yes, exactly. That was like, girl, you've never been like this before. What's going on?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So another thing that actually stood out for me earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that you were just going in for a checkup, but you noticed some different things. Your doctor kind of stepped out of the room and came back with the diagnoses. It sounds like you had a good experience, but again, I don't want to make that assumption. One of the things that I'm passionate about is education around microaggressions, especially for women of color in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that specific experience like for you working with your doctor? Did you feel heard? Did you feel received?
Mm-hmm.
And did you feel like you got the support that you needed from your treatment team?
Okay, that is a great question. So initially, no, right? And let me tell you why. So initially, I had went to the doctors, made my appointment because we have the yearly checkup.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna, this is how I've been feeling. Let me jot down everything that I want to, present and ask my doctor.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, hey, Ms. Hopkins, your regular, OBGYN can't see you, but another doctor can see you.
So somebody you weren't familiar with?
Somebody I was unfamiliar with. So I'm just like, do I want to take this appointment? Because I'm used to my doctor. We have a good rapport. What do I want to do? And I said, let me go ahead and take this appointment because there's no telling anybody that knows, that's going to get their yearly checkup. You don't want to cancel because it may be 3 months to
a year
before you get your next appointment.
And you're in this experience right now.
Right now,
You want
exactly.
to support now.
So I said, okay, let me go ahead and take the appointment, right? So I go in and everything's fine, check my cooter cat, does all the thing. And, a part of it is your breast exam, right? And that was one of my questions because I had just this little, I guess, bump up here on my breast, right?
Okay.
So I'm just like, let me ask her this first, and then I'm gonna move into my other concerns that I had, right? So she checking my breast, and I'm like, hey, I also wanted to, highlight or just mention that, I have this, bump here, and I just wanted to get it checked out because, again, that's part of the exam, right? The doctor was like, oh, I'm not a dermatologist. You may want to follow up with your dermatologist. And I'm just thinking, I had like an outer body experience, Jasmine, because I'm just like, girl, I know you're not a damn dermatologist.
Right.
You're just in my cooter cat. Right. I know what doctor I'm at, So I'm just like, okay, if that's your attitude, I don't even want to ask you about my other concerns. I was literally had my list.
This is the first thing on your checkbox.
Exactly. Let me ask her about this that's on my breast. And then I'm, once I get that answer, I wanted to move into what I was experiencing. So I'm just like, that really shut me down. So I'm just like, okay. Turn off. I'm still going through, I'm still stuck at, did this lady just ask me, go follow with a dermatologist?
I
know I'm not at the dermatologist, so that just really turned me off from asking anything else. So as soon as I got home, I'm just like, okay, I gotta find a new OBGYN, right? Found a new OBGYN, which brings me up to when I received my diagnosis, which they were very, again, she stepped out the room, came back, sat down with me, and was just like, this is what PMDD is. This is how you can treat it. You also need to follow up with a psychiatrist because that's how they actually diagnose PMDD. It's kind of like the psychiatrist and your OBGYN kind of work in tandem, to create a treatment plan for you. And typically, you're out of the office, I want to say tops, 30, 45 minutes. Like I was in there probably like an hour and some change, and they just really took their time, sat with me. Also gave me some other treatment plans that, they said that in addition to, hormonal birth control, you can take some alternatives that you can take, and that there's research out there on. They wouldn't necessarily, because they're, not FDA approved, but what the limited research says about them.
Okay, so they were very open-minded.
Very open-minded, and I'm just like, thank you guys so much. You know what I mean? So, and just thinking of it, they just reached out to me last week and was like, hey, Ms. Hopkins, we need to get you back in the office. Follow up. Yes, and I was just like, yeah, this is my office right here. This is my office. So yeah, that was kind of my experience leading up to.
Thank you for sharing. Obviously I'm seeing medical providers myself, and one of the things that has always been a turn off for me is following up with, reaching out to a doctor, having an experience, getting a diagnosis for whatever it might be,
Right.
and then there is no follow-up.
Right.
It's almost like a revolving door. You're just another
Another
person.
number, yeah.
I saw you for that 15-minute consult, and then I never think or see you again.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy. I'm sorry about your initial experience, but I'm really happy that you did wind up getting connected to the second OBGYN.
Yes.
That really took her time with
Yes,
you,
yes,
even
yes.
stepped out to consult other people before prematurely sharing a diagnosis that she might not
Right.
even sure about.
Because that does happen.
It does.
happen.
It does. So I'm really thankful that was your experience the
Yes.
second time
Thank you.
around.
Dr. Okasi out with Greenbelt and Columbia. So
Shout out.
shout out to them. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things when I was doing my research on you and PMDD, I was checking out your Instagram, which is I.overflow, correct?
Correct. So everybody can follow me there. I.overflow, where I just kind of bring awareness about PMDD, period poverty, and just, the education is really big to me, right? So while I know there's like a slew of products that are on the market, and yes, I will be, offering a product as well. For me, it's more so about the education, just because of my experience that I went through as far as being 38, just coming into knowledge of PMDD. Like, so who's supposed to tell us this?
If I could say, when I checked out your Instagram, if your main goal was for education, it translates. It translates very well.
Thank you.
It's the first message that I did receive is that this person is very involved on this topic and is sharing as much as she can.
Thank you.
But the other thing that I really love about your Instagram is that it's very lighthearted, and I think it's taking such a difficult, unfamiliar topic that might be very uncomfortable for a lot of women to talk about, and just makes it more lighthearted. And I really appreciated that as well. And I think young women would appreciate that, and the older women who are just now finding about the diagnosis, just like you were. So I loved your Instagram, and I did see that you had a post on period poverty, and I'm like, what is period poverty?
Yes.
Please tell me.
So period poverty is pretty much the lack of education, resources, and facilities around menstrual products, right? And just that menstrual education that I want to say, I believe, is 1 in 5 girls in the U.S. miss school because of the lack of period products. So that's kind of what this whole coming into PMDD, that's kind of like the rabbit hole that this has led, me to like, hey, this is something that we could potentially solve. You know what I mean? This is something that, I can potentially highlight and kind of bridge that gap of education, as well as products, in a way that, like you had mentioned, like is lighthearted, is fun, and like fashionable, and we can just talk about it. You know what I mean? Very girls girl, and not like, oh my gosh, period.
Very formal.
Yes, you know what I mean? Just talk about it. It's something that's, it's something that happens. It's a biological function of our bodies. Why are we hiding that? Why are we, felt shame behind that. You know what I mean? It's a natural process. We need to embrace that process. We need to come into the knowledge of that process to kind of bridge that gaps and that stigma around our periods.
Okay. I want to hear more about what you're doing to offer resources to young women because like you said, they can miss school because they don't have access to care. So I want to hear more about that. But then I also just want to share with the audience that when you first got here, you did give me a couple of things.
I did.
So if I could just share.
Of course.
I have 2 things.
Yes.
This is a cup, you said?
Our menstrual flow cup. So this is one of the products that I will be releasing next month. So a part of me just, again, coming into the knowledge and being diagnosed with PMDD is finding the right products to just help alleviate other symptoms as well, as far as that severe achy feeling that you have down there around your cycle,
You think about tampons and like the toxicity.
So, exactly.
The uncomfortableness of
inserting. Exactly. So with this cup, it just feels like, okay, one, there's nothing there.
Once you get it in the right position. Nothing's
there. But what's unique about my cup is, so I'm a nail girly. I see you're a nail girly too. But typically on a cup, there's that short stem.
Okay.
And with the other brands, like it was hard for me to get
that
stem
because
of my nails, right?
Yes.
So I'm just like, I love the cup, I love the idea of the cup, but just trying to get that stem with my nails was hard. So with my cup, it's like a ring on the bottom where all you have to do is hook to it and pull it down.
I love it.
So I'm just like, this is what works for me. So I will be releasing those and launching those next month, and looking to just launch other period products as well after we go through a little bit more of just third-party testing, because as you mentioned, the toxins that can be found in some of the period products. So we are going through additional third-party testing for that.
Make sure it's safe for everyone.
Safe for everyone. So yeah,
that is so wonderful. I'm not too familiar with cups. I've seen them, I've heard about them, I've always wanted to try them. I absolutely hate tampons. I hate pads, if I'm being honest. Like diapers, they move.
Exactly. And then you have to sit in that blood, and I'm just like, I don't want to feel that sensation on me.
Go ahead, mercy, cold.
Exactly.
Girl.
So the cup, it just catches it all. You pull it out, you
empty it, and it's reusable.
And it's reusable. So then that helps with the girlies that, like, if you're short on cash, use a cup. You know what I mean? You could just, use your cup and you have a sustainable product for month to month. Whereas other period products, those pads, the tampons, that can add up.
Unrecyclable.
Exactly.
Landfill issues. We can go on a
whole
different conversation. I love this and I really appreciate this. And then you also shared with me a cleanser.
So that's a cleanser for the cup. So then after, you're done and you're ready to pack your cup up until next month, cleanse it. And then of course after each use, you want to
cleanse it with this.
Yep.
Beautiful. Also going through third-party testing.
Yes.
Make sure it's safe. Of course.
Safe for everyone.
Absolutely love.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful.